Mid-16th century, 4 pirate ships were cutting through the Indian Ocean, each one packed with treasures. Half a year's worth of plunder. The night was pitch black, the air freezing, the sea raging. Then, out of nowhere, came a storm so powerful it tore all 4 ships from their anchors. Sailors hacked down the masts, tossed the upper decks overboard, pumped water with all their strength, but nothing helped. The ropes snapped, the ships slammed into the shore, splintering apart as the sea swallowed both lives and loot. And what kind of treasures did pirates keep? Gold bars, jewels, weapons. But for one pirate, the man I'm about to tell you about, the greatest treasure wasn't gold.
It was his book. Yes, a pirate writer. And that book earned him immortality. A story that outlived every storm he ever faced, while the rest, the treasure and the tales, faded away. He was captured 13 times, sold into slavery 16 times, and survived more shipwrecks than he could count. He wrote his story in a book called The Peregrination. Fernão Mendes Pinto. In Portugal, everyone knows his name, but here, hardly anyone has heard of him. Let's fix that and dive into his incredible story together.
So how did the shipwreck story end? The survivors, naked and battered, hid in the coastal swamp, and when morning came, they crawled onto a shore littered with bodies. 586 men had died, and there wasn't a single soul who didn't collapse to the ground, mourning the fallen. About 50 people made it to the island, but that wasn't the end of their tragedy. The island was uninhabited, and they were stranded there. In a single night, the crew lost friends, ships, and all their treasure. The survivors buried the dead, and their pirate captain, Antonio de Faria, gave a speech.
We have to try to put all of this behind us, because holding on to our sorrow only keeps each other's wounds fresh. Soon, we'll need to earn not just the 500,000 we've lost, but 600, and that's only the beginning.
It was encouraging, of course, but almost everyone was dead. The supplies were gone in 5 days, and hunger set in. Some collapsed searching for food, and by the end of the second week, things were grim. But then fate offered them a glimmer of hope, quite symbolically, really. A hawk swooped by and dropped a fresh fish right at Faria's feet. Antonio was moved to tears, thanking God and asking forgiveness for his sins. He roasted the fish and fed the sick and exhausted crew. Following the hawk's flight, de Faria decided to go in the direction it was heading. They ventured further into the island. Don't ask why they hadn't done it sooner, and found fresh water and a deer recently killed by a tiger. Can you imagine? After 2 whole weeks, a whole deer. And then, just a couple of days later, something nearly impossible happened. The crew spotted a ship approaching. A ship. Completely unsuspecting, the people went ashore, started washing clothes and filling their water barrels. While the people were busy with their tasks, the pirates, saying, "The Lord sent us salvation," seized their ship, shooting some of the crew from aboard. They had dinner first, because, well, pirates, and then set sail again.
Remember, in July of 1497, a fleet of ships led by Vasco da Gama set sail from Portugal to discover a new sea route to India. Later, other explorers followed in their wake, and soon Portugal became the dominant power in the Indian Ocean.
The age of discovery had begun, and with it came blood, violence, new wars, and, of course, piracy, sweeping across the newly opened lands of the East. Piracy has existed ever since people first set out in boats to transport their goods anywhere at all. Back then, it wasn't much different from highway robbery on land. At first, attacks were small and local, but everything changed when ships appeared carrying incredible wealth, the budgets of entire nations. The game got serious, the stakes grew higher, and the players became even more desperate.
The competition was enormous. Every king or prince dreamed of carving out a piece of the eastern coast and claiming it for their own colonies. The ships carried immense wealth, and not a single one, not even the largest and most powerful, was truly safe. Portugal sent knights and nobles to protect their colonies, but it still wasn't enough. Who do you think would ever venture into unknown lands with no guarantees? That's right, those who had nothing to lose.
People hungry for fame or fortune, daring and utterly desperate. Don't expect high moral principles here. For most, the main drive was pure profit. They switched roles easily, sometimes as merchants, sometimes as ruthless pirates, and sometimes serving as mercenaries for local eastern princes.
Sometimes they even fought against their own fellow Portuguese. Selling out your homeland if needed was no problem at all. All in all, it was a complicated time of colonial conquests. Fernão Mendes Pinto often dealt with people like this, but was he one of them too?
He fled Portugal on March 11, 1537, and set sail on a ship into the vast Indian Ocean. We don't know exactly what drove him to these journeys. He himself wrote that he sought fame and fortune.
But perhaps the reasons ran much deeper. In 1535 and 36, Portugal established the Tribunal of the Holy Inquisition. The authorities forced the Jewish population to make a stark choice: either fully convert to Christianity or leave the country entirely. Many did convert, but they were soon accused of secretly practicing Judaism. Some were actually caught performing Jewish rituals and were then executed as religious criminals. In other words, as heretics. Pinto's parents were also executed as new Christians. At that time, he was left alone. But it's likely that a few years later, the authorities would turn their attention to him as well. Isn't that reason enough to flee far away to distant lands?
What was happening in Indochina at the time? By then, almost all the states we know in that region today had been established. Yet within and between these states, political life was turbulent and constantly shifting. There were constant disputes and struggles for power. These feudal wars disrupted trade between countries, and conquering new lands wasn't exactly on their minds. They had their own mess to sort out first.
Most Asian states didn't really have a strong navy at that time. So when the Portuguese arrived with their massive fleets, they quickly seized firm control over the crucial sea routes and all the major trade transit. They strictly forbade the locals from trading with other countries and completely seized the most profitable market in India: spices. This, of course, badly hurt the region's economy.
Plus, we can't forget all the advanced military know-how the Europeans had at the time. The stronghold in the city of Malacca became Portugal's most powerful and strategic base in the region. And there, not in the capital Lisbon, they decided what happened in South and East Asia.
Pinto quickly adapted and soon found a friend in Antonio de Faria. Ahead lay countless thrilling adventures. But our daring pirates weren't after money alone. They aimed to defeat their deadliest enemy, Koja Asen. He was the feared leader of the pirates from Siam, the country we now call Thailand. He was killing every Portuguese he came across, and 6 months earlier, he had captured Antonio's ship and plundered it. The crew found themselves in enormous debt.
For 6 months, they sailed, visiting settlements, trying to learn anything about their enemy, but all in vain. Once again, they came across a junk ship. Once again, they asked about Asen. For the first time, they heard, "Yes, we've seen him, just over there." Antonio gave the order to weigh anchor. They set sail at full speed in hot pursuit. The crew was ready for battle. Silently, they approached the junk ship. De Faria's men boarded and quickly took out almost everyone.
They questioned the survivors. Who were they and where was Koja Asen? They searched the entire ship, but he was nowhere. Yes, and you've probably guessed it, they were completely wrong. This crew had absolutely nothing to do with their deadliest enemy. And of course, they went through all the stages: denial, anger, bargaining. Frustrated, they sailed on. Then, out there in the open sea, a ship suddenly appeared. And that ship was definitely not happy to see them. How did they realize it? Cannonballs from 12 guns rained down, and then the ship closed in, ready to board. At the very last moment, the captain shouted, "Hey, are you Portuguese?" "Portuguese." "Lower your weapons!"
The ship was commanded by an old, experienced Chinese sailor. His crew included many Portuguese, and he had a deep respect for their country, customs, culture, and people. It turned out that both crews had plenty of acquaintances. They climbed aboard Antonio and Pinto's junk to celebrate, drinking, laughing, and becoming friends. Faria told the story of Asen, and after another round, the Chinese captain said,
To hell with it! Let's go find that dog Asen together. I've got a ship, 100 men, 15 cannons, and 30 muskets.
As the saying goes, the more you drink, the farther you sail. So the two crews set off together to finally deal with their common enemy. Believe it or not, the Chinese captain seemed to bring luck. They soon learned Asen was nearby with 7 ships and 500 men. Not right away, of course, but they eventually found him, launched a full-scale operation, assigned everyone their roles, and surrounded Asen's junk. From the shore, the locals spotted the strangers and rang the bells. Reinforcements were on the way, but Antonio shouted, "Forward, in the name of Christ!" and everyone charged into battle. Cannons and guns roared from all sides. The battle was fierce and dragged on for hours. In the end, Antonio charged at Asen and split his head clean open. Pinto claimed that 380 enemies were killed, while they lost only 42 men. Honestly, I don't know how they counted that, so take it with a grain of salt. Their loot had noticeably increased too: silk, porcelain, and all the other treasures Asen had plundered over the year. With their enemy defeated, they were rich again. Both goals achieved.
What happened next? They plundered again, lost again, survived more shipwrecks, and faced death, yet somehow stayed alive. They explored new lands, and Pinto recorded their adventures. Note that, like an old sea dog, he loved tall tales and exaggerations. But his book is largely biographical and detailed. But not every story about the characters actually happened to real people. For example, after visiting Thailand, here's what he wrote.
The soil is extremely fertile, and the country lacks neither useful plants nor fresh, abundant meat. The highlands are covered in dense, impenetrable forests, enough to build thousands of sturdy, well-crafted ships. The land produces large amounts of silver, iron, steel, lead, tin, saltpeter, and sulfur in abundance. There's plenty of silk, aloe, frankincense, indigo, cotton fabrics, rubies, sapphires, ivory, and gold. All of this in extremely large quantities. Just imagine how much more profitable would it be for us to control this kingdom rather than everything we currently hold in India, and how much cheaper these holdings would be.
This duality in his book is striking. He criticizes colonization, calling out its dishonesty, then encourages colonizing, at times Siam, at times Burma. But usually, the criticism of colonization is put into the mouths of the colonized. Like, hey, look at yourselves, what are you doing? Like, how can you act like this? Yet, as a loyal subject of the crown, he can't help but prioritize Portugal's core interests. So in his reflections, he always selects the juiciest piece for her. Even in the quote above, there's a clear understanding that the Portuguese can't hold everything. They need to focus on just one thing. Pinto also hints at this indirectly. Perhaps that's why he urges them to choose a single stronghold. Over the years, Pinto saw much, as you've probably gathered. One remarkable story really stands out. In 1542, Mendes, Pinto, and Antonio reached the shores of China.
On an almost deserted island, they came across a stunning tomb, simply breathtaking. They had never seen anything like it before. Naturally, they decided to loot it, and there were many grand temples there. They opened one, and inside was an old man, over 100 years old. Seeing the stunned pirates, he faints. Antonio revives him, soothing him with sweet words to calm him down. Meanwhile, the guys are looting the temple. The old man prays for them to leave the sacred items, and Defaria says, "Of course, don't worry, we'll return everything." They gathered all the silver in the temple. Defaria said to the old man, "I'm sorry to rob you, but otherwise my masters will kill me." And the old man replied, "God bless you." The crew left the island and sailed for a week. Then another terrible storm hit. The ship was torn apart. They chopped masts, threw their loot overboard, and prayed to God. Pinto and his friend Antonio were on different ships, and Mendes heard Defaria's vessel calling out, "Lord, have mercy on us!" After that, no one saw their ship again. The desperate, brave, and resourceful pirate Antonio Defaria, a favorite of fortune, perished in the raging sea. For a long time, people thought Antonio Defaria from the book was pure fiction and never existed. But in 1971, a Portuguese historian discovered in the archives the will of the pirate Antonio Defaria e Souza. This document made it clear that this was indeed the same pirate Faria who had sailed the seas with Pinto. Some parts of the documents match sections of Mendes' book, and as it turned out, he didn't die in that storm. He lived another 6 years and died in Goa, having squandered every last penny.
Pinto, however, survived the storm. Next came prison, torture, hunger, a death sentence, and forced labor on the Great Wall of China. But he managed to escape when the Tartars captured them. The Tartar emperor personally freed him. This character may have been entirely fictional, and Pinto deliberately added him to weave in his own reflections or to cleverly sidestep the topic of their actual release.
In his work, Northern China Tartary is portrayed as almost perfect, with exemplary rulers and laws. In contrast, he mocks Portuguese customs and governance. In the language of his contemporaries, Tartary was practically unknown territory, a vast, mysterious blank spot on the map. Geographically, it covered much of Central Asia, with many diverse regions, but Europeans knew almost nothing about them.
According to historical records and chronology, the likely prototype for the Tartar emperor could have been the Mongolian emperor Dayan Khan, who fought the Chinese for a long time and quite successfully, ultimately defeating their forces in 1542, the very year Pinto happened to be there.
Pinto's fellow countrymen, aware of the corruption at home, the terrible state of prisons, and the crushing taxes, could easily read this contrast. There were no inquisitions there, people of other faiths were welcomed, and everyone was given shelter.
Pinto kept traveling for many adventurous years on various ships with different pirates. Over time, he amassed a truly huge fortune. In 1545, he met a very prominent member of the Society of Jesus, Francis Xavier.
A very well-known historical figure, he was the first Catholic missionary in Japan and was later canonized as a saint. Under his influence, Pinto joined the order. He freed his slaves, donated the majority of his wealth to the order, and set off for Japan to advance the Jesuit mission.
But soon he grew disillusioned with it all. He was dissatisfied with the behavior of some members of the order and how it operated. In travels, he omitted this part of his life. He went through a crisis of ideals, which influenced his decision to leave the order.
Over 21 years of travels, he learned about many different countries, having visited India, Ethiopia, China, Sumatra, and countless other places.
Years later, he returned to Portugal. Before him lay a country that had changed. In 1578, Portugal lost a major battle in Morocco against the Muslims and had to pay a huge ransom for their captured prisoners. The country's economy was seriously weakened. All of this ultimately cost them their empire. Portugal was conquered by the powerful king of Spain, Philip II.
He was the heir to the Portuguese throne through his mother and successfully claimed his rights. The Portuguese resisted fiercely, yet Philip's well-equipped forces still managed to occupy the country in just 4 short months. From 1580 onward, both nations were ruled by one monarch.
After Portugal was conquered, the Spanish Navy came to dominate the seas. Meanwhile, other powers were on the rise, most notably the Dutch and the English. But that, of course, is a whole other story. Fernão Mendes Pinto was not just a pirate. He also served his crown and carried out diplomatic missions. Yes, back then it was also a time when one could work in overlapping roles, robbing with one hand while carrying out royal errands with the other, hoping to be rewarded at home for his service. But
after submitting his reports to the official, he waited a long 4.5 years. No one hurried to properly thank him. In truth, his country had little use for him. Pinto spent his life chasing wealth, most of which sank to the sea's bottom. In the end, he realized life itself was the greatest treasure, full of adventures, both dreadful and romantic. From all these ordeals, he gained his greatest treasure, his book Navigations. Surprisingly, the greedy Philip II eventually granted him an annual allowance. Guess how much? Just 2 measures of grain. Overall, it was enough to live on, but it wasn't exactly what he had hoped for. The king wasn't paying him for service. He was paying for the book. Philip spent hours engrossed in Mendes and the pirates' stories. It benefited the Spanish crown to publish the book as an example of Portuguese mistakes and a record of colonial crimes. Already under Philip III, the book was published and became a bestseller. The first copy appeared in 1614. Sadly, Pinto did not live to see its success and recognition 31 years after his death. And in the 17th and 18th centuries, all of Western Europe was utterly captivated by his incredible adventures. This wasn't just a novel. It was largely a detailed historical chronicle of the era.
His travels are considered one of the greatest adventure stories of the 16th century. The book was translated into many European languages and became a classic of Portuguese literature. And in 2016, the country's oldest newspaper listed it among the 50 most important works of Portuguese literature, placing it, pay attention, in 7th place.
By the way, in 2017, the Portuguese made a film based on his novel, so his story still continues to inspire creators today. Historians highly praised his book. He captured the era accurately and detailed places and events, military campaigns, battles, and vivid descriptions of countries, peoples, and customs.
18th century historian Samuel Menzies, reading Pinto's records of Sumatra, said, "No one wrote more accurately than Pinto." Indologists value him for the unique information he provides. There's simply no more detailed account of the Portuguese presence there. In fact, on many important topics, he is almost the only European source.
Pinto was a true child of his time, mischievous and full of contradictions. His life was like a shard caught in the whirlpool of monumental events.
Of course, the escapades Pinto describes are thrilling and fascinating to read. But even more important are the striking contradictions he reveals. After all, if you look closely, he was essentially one of the very first Europeans in those distant lands. Interestingly, the issues that arose even at the earliest cultural contacts didn't disappear, even centuries later. Pinto, like a sad Don Quixote, disillusioned with knighthood by the end of his book, seems to grow disillusioned with Europe's ambitions as well. As a character in his book once said, "The Portuguese have much greed but little truth. The search for truth is always difficult, and Pinto sought it, but never found it." Perhaps that's why he bequeathed the earnings from his memoirs of a reckless and hard life to a shelter for penitent women. Most of his actions today would merit multiple life sentences, yet he always stayed true to his era, which allowed him to capture it and show us through the lens of his own fate, hopes, and disappointments. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications. Give this video a thumbs up, leave a comment, it really helps its reach, and share it with your friends if you enjoyed it even a little bit.